My guest today is Ted Neward. Ted, how are you, sir?
I'm fine. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. What do you do?
What do I do? Oh, wow. That's actually a hard question to answer. I do a lot of consulting, writing, speaking, general pontificating.
That's enough. I heard your pontification this afternoon at Devley.
Yes.
You were talking about iconoclasts, how we need to be iconoclasts. Start off, you were talking about why that's important. What's going on in this world that we need to worry about?
Well, fundamentally, your job is being replaced. I mean, it's just a matter of time when, because, forget the outsourcing thing for a second. There's this path of automation that's been happening over time. And, what people used to do by hand because they could do it efficiently, the slide rule got replaced by the calculator, the assembly language programmer got replaced by the compiler, all of these things. And the short version of it is, if you are not careful, you'll be one of those that gets replaced by these automated tools. And you don't want to do that because, not surprisingly, the automated tool doesn't, it doesn't come to you with questions. There's no reason to keep you around, etc. So, people need to find ways to prove their value to the company, and the way they can do that in many cases is by proving that they can do things that automated tools cannot, which is to say that they can see the world differently, that they're not afraid to champion that cause, and that they know how to connect with people to demonstrate how the world could be different if only you listen to what I'm suggesting that you do.
Okay. So I'm in that boat myself. I'm a software developer. I write code, and we can't really ignore the outsourcing entirely. There are people in other countries that write that code a lot cheaper than I can.
Absolutely.
What am I going to do to prepare myself, to make myself more, you used the word iconoclastic before, and can you define that?
So the official definition of the iconoclast is the destroyer of icons, right? Specifically the idea that it derives from a Roman emperor who decided that he wanted to get out from under the thumb of the church. So quite literally, he tore down the icons of the church. This was Leo III, right, in 750 something AD. And so he tore down the icons over his throne to indicate that I am above these icons. I'm above the church. I'm more powerful than that. Literally the destroyer of icons. And iconoclasts throughout history, for example, Martin Luther King or Branch Hickey, or these people who basically, when told that it couldn't be done, said yes it can, and here's how, and then went out and did it. And the first thing that the iconoclast needs to do is he needs to be able to see the world differently. He needs to be able to perceive things differently. In the case of, for example, Dale Chihuly, who is quite possibly the most successful artist, businessman in history, for him the real breakthrough didn't happen until he lost an eye in a car accident. Forced to see the world differently, he said, I don't want to do what traditional glass sculpture has been which is to do everything in a very symmetrical pattern. He said, I can't do symmetrical anymore because I've lost an eye. I've lost depth perception. So I'm going to say, to heck with this. I'm going to do asymmetrical pieces. And he literally redefined the glass artistry industry overnight. Well, maybe not overnight, but over a period of decades, to the point where now he runs a studio of over 100 people. He sells his pieces for upwards of $1 million. Had his own show at the Louvre. Dude's been successful. But that, from a practical perspective, for where you and I sit,
right,
what this means is seeing the world differently means getting out of your comfort zone. It means looking at the world, looking at parts of the world that you haven't seen before, so that you can take that experience back to the parts of the world that you do interact with. So if you're a .NET developer, this means looking at Java, not necessarily the language, but the ecosystem. How is the ecosystem, how are the tools, the vendors different from what we see in the .NET space? Okay. Looking at Ruby, looking at other languages, tools, anything. And in some cases, quite frankly, looking at even beyond the software industry, right? People frequently will ask on panels at conferences, what's the best book you've read recently? And I start rattling off psychology books. on being certain, or mistakes were made, or people are like, no, we mean technical books. And I said, this is technical because this is talking about how my mind works. And at the end of the day, all software really happens up here. This is just how we express it.
Sure.
So, getting out of your comfort zone and reading something completely different will often wake up parts of your brain and show you ways of thinking about things, of doing things, that's very, very different from everything we've seen before.
All right, so what I'm hearing is we've got our way of doing things. We've got a way that has been working with us for a while. Even if it's been working with us, even if it's been working for us for a while, don't assume that's going to work in the future. The world is changing.
It's not even that things are changing, but it's the fact that you want to change.
Okay.
The way in which you write code will change significantly after you start using, for example, a functional language, right?
Okay.
So Kevin Hazard did a great talk on F# at DevLink.
Mm-hmm.
If you get a chance to see Kevin talk about F#, I strongly suggest you do so. Because once you start looking at a functional language, as a dyed-in-the-wool object-oriented developer, it's hard to look at a functional language and say, how is this different? How is this interesting? How is this useful? When you see it shown to you, all of a sudden you see that there's a whole new axis by which we can make development decisions that you just didn't even realize was possible before. And it's not that, somebody reinvented computer science. It's the fact they made you aware of a completely different way of looking at the world. It's kind of like the optical illusions, right? When you first see them, you're like, I don't get it. And then somebody shows it to you, or you see the optical illusion, you're like, oh, I get it now. And you will never be able to go to that ignorant state again.
Right.
Your code will change significantly from looking at a dynamic language or a functional language, or even one that strongly incorporates metaprogramming concepts, as opposed to just a traditional OO language.
Okay. I've discovered that's the case even if I never write a line of F#. Just simply by seeing F#, seeing the way things are done there, it'll affect the way that I'm writing my C# programs. I'll realize maybe the impact of side effects on my methods, for example. Or
you will find ways to write code that is better for a variety of different definitions.
That's just an example that I'm throwing out there.
Right. But I mean, better because it's conceptually simpler, because you're able to see what it is you're trying to do more clearly. For whatever reason, you'll be able to see it and go, oh, of course, that's what I was trying to do. It's the same effect that people had when they looked at patterns, right? Patterns led people to go, oh, that's what I was trying to do. Once you see it, all of a sudden many things become more clear and you can start thinking at higher levels of abstraction.
Okay. Well, Ted, I really appreciate your time. Thanks for being on my show. And
you're very welcome.
Thanks for speaking to DevLink.
You bet.